Hold on 1 second. Just getting the stream started.
Say welcome back. So we are now entering the labor section. If you're on Zoom, for automated captions, you can select the button at the bottom of your Zoom screen that says CC Live Transcript. And then you can select for subtitles or the transcript. Also, we're asking, if you're on social media to please engage with us at For Us Not Amazon on Twitter and with the hashtag Up Against Amazon, which we will drop in the chat. You can also check out our Up Against Amazon orientation guide at forusnotamazon.org. So we're here, we're going to introduce Yambeli Gomez, who is with Make the Road New Jersey. Before joining Make the Road New Jersey as the lead workplace justice organizer, Yambeli was an at-large member of the Newark Public School Board of Education in New Jersey and worked as a community and education organizer on various political campaigns. Yambeli has also worked as a labor organizer and assisted in raising the minimum wage for poor and working class people around the country. We will also be introducing Veronica Alvarado, who is the co-founder and Deputy Director of the Warehouse Worker Resource Center and Atwood. She has over 10 years of experience educating and supporting warehouse workers and janitors who are dealing with issues of workplace health and safety, wage theft, discrimination, and other issues. She attended the Mount St. Mary's College. So thank you and welcome.
Oh, we can't hear you, Yambeli.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I was like, where is she?
I apologize. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you, Stephanie, for that introduction. And I just want to say thank you so much to Dr. Hilal for having me for this invitation today. I really appreciate it. I'm going to talk about several things. I think, when we talk about workers, in New Jersey right now, we don't want to, we're building a coalition, and I'll talk a little bit more about the coalition we've built and also about the workers that are currently, organizing. But when we think about our communities and workers, sometimes we think about them as two different things. And I think at Make the Road New Jersey, we've been trying to kind of connect workers and the communities they live in to this fight, against, Amazon's expansion in New Jersey. So I'll start just with explaining the work we've been doing. And part of that is two parts. Right, we have been organizing Amazon workers, but we've also been creating a coalition to fight Amazon expansion, specifically around an airport hub in Newark Airport. So, like was said before, I am the lead workplace justice organizer with Make the Road New Jersey. Make the Road New Jersey is a community organization that builds the power of immigrant and working class communities in New Jersey. I'll first start talking about the Good Jobs and Clean Air Coalition. So that coalition came about last year, in August of last year, between our organization that's based in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and environmental groups and labor groups in Newark and, all over the state. Sometimes it's not obvious to people, but the fight for good jobs is also a fight for the environment and for clean air in New Jersey. And I'll make that connection in a minute. So on August 5th, 2021, the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey, they're usually the institution that leases the land in Newark Airport, which is one of the largest, airports, regional airports here. They authorized their executive director to enter into a 20-year lease agreement with Amazon Global Air for 2 buildings on a 23-acre site at Newark Airport. Amazon plans to transform that site into a 250,000 square feet air cargo facility and will pay the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey $150 million in rent upfront and approximately $157 million in rent during the terms of the lease, and an estimated $125 million in capital investment. This was a really big deal when we read about it from a very small article that came out on August 5th. We were kind of in shock just because if you know anything about Newark and Elizabeth, we are already, we're mainly Black and brown people that live, in Newark and Elizabeth. I live in Newark, and we have the second largest port in the country. We have incredible amount of truck traffic already coming through. A lot of our community has already worked for Amazon or is currently working for Amazon at one of their many delivery stations or warehouses in the area. During the pandemic, they expanded in a rate that was unprecedented in New Jersey. They are now the largest employer in New Jersey as of right now. And that wasn't the case before the pandemic. So, this deal, we tried to find more information about it. There was nothing. They gave the authorization to the executive director to sign this lease in August. But when they did that, the deal wasn't even on the agenda. There was no way for any kind of public comments on anything. It was done in a lot of secrecy with very few details. So we came together, some incredible environmental groups that have been fighting in Newark for decades, us and some labor unions that were also very concerned about them coming into Newark Airport, because we later found out that this airport hub is displacing union members already at the airport. So we know that, Amazon is notorious for violating workers' rights, and, they've hurt a lot of small businesses in the area as well during the pandemic. And the community surrounding the airport, mainly of Newark and Elizabeth, didn't get to weigh in on this deal. And I'm going to share a little, an article about also how these warehouses have come in. It's a great article about how a lot of these warehouses come in communities of color, and they work in a very systemic way of just exploiting the community and not really giving anything back to it. So we've been going since last year. We started in September, going to every single Port Authority meeting. They're supposed to usually meet once in New York City, 1 month in New York City, 1 month in New Jersey. But since the pandemic, they have not come to New Jersey. So we've had to go to New York City since last September, every single month. We've been outside, we've been protesting, they are not accepting any kind of public participation in the meetings. And we have been instead submitting videos because it's the only thing they would permit. It's just been very frustrating because they haven't done an environmental impact study. We have done Oprah requests to find out more information about the deal. They have not answered. So we are highly concerned. And I think that one of the things that they were trying to sell to the community is that they're going to bring 1,000 new jobs. But we already know from experience, and actually I've talked to other airport hub workers from around the country. We've had a meeting just so they can give us kind of a heads up here in Newark, what's coming for us. And high injury rates, and it's very similar to the warehouse work that already exists in New Jersey, and high turnover rates as well. We believe, the coalition believes, that we deserve better than that. We deserve better than just the churn that Amazon goes through our communities, right? We have been canvassing every single week since September. We stopped a little bit in the winter, but we've kept up, and we've collected thousands actually of petitions, pledge cards, just asking the Port Authority to please stop this deal, and to please consider the community in this deal. From that, we've also been kind of reaching out to workers, because what we realized is that when we went into the community and we started talking to people, we were talking to a lot of Amazon workers, and they all live in they all live in the same neighborhoods. They take rides together. So it's also been a way of us, organizing workers outside of Amazon in a way that has made it just more organic and just more, just easier, to talk to these workers, because of the high turnover rate in these facilities. You have a worker that might be working in Carteret, and for like a couple of months, and then all of a sudden they're working at the Elizabeth delivery station, so it has just worked out for us in a way where we're actually able to just talk to workers in their communities when we know like certain neighborhoods have a high concentration of Amazon workers. So that's a little bit of our organizing, and it's a little bit of the coalition that we also have created. And it's also been really great to talk to workers and just community residents who are workers about the environmental impact, because they do feel it every day. We have incredible asthma rates around this, around the airport. We a lot of children in the area have asthma, and adults, and a lot of truck traffic. Everybody in the community complains about the roads, and just like how there's no plan to like fix anything, like how they feel like, we've just been abandoned to this kind of like this pollution in our area. It's an incredible coalition of groups that are really fighting and see the connections between jobs, between the environment, and between just, all of us in the community, and just like the levels of oppression in our communities, and how we have to address all of it to a certain extent in order for workers to really rise up and to really organize in a way that they feel supported. So just to, talk a little bit more in depth, while I think I still have like 10 minutes or something like that. Kind of, okay.
And I meant you can take more time if you need.
Okay, just give me a time check, please. So like I said, airport hubs are very similar to Amazon warehouse jobs. In other air hubs, workers reported that the main jobs are similar types of work, and that, they also said that Amazon did not comply fully with OSHA reporting requirements for air facilities. So the data is pretty incomplete and extremely limited. So from the limited data that we had, we can see that injury rates were higher than the private sector average. And in the first quarter of 2021, one air hub facility reported a total of 58 injuries. So I know that there's been other articles that have shown just like how Amazon leads in injury rates across the country in their warehouses, even more so than Walmart. So it's just talking to workers on a regular week after week, especially in our communities. I mean, I have family who's worked for Amazon. It's impossible to kind of live in Newark and Elizabeth and not know somebody who's worked at Amazon, and also not know somebody who's been injured by working at Amazon. These jobs are highly automated. In 2019, the last year of, injury available data, they had a serious injury rate of 7.9 per 100 workers. And it's just, again, it's just out of control. And what we found with workers is that when they try to ask for accommodations, they are being denied time and time and time again. They get injured on the job, and even access to workers' compensation is sometimes difficult, or even access to HR. It is a struggle for a lot of workers to get the help that they need in a lot of the situations. And what they do is they just end up leaving the job because they just physically cannot. They're standing up 10 to 12 hours a day, being, just doing, like, the rates are ridiculous, right? So the other thing that's happening in New Jersey right now in terms of just how Amazon is expanding is that because of this airport hub, supposedly coming into the area, they have created a network of delivery stations in Newark and Elizabeth, already preparing for the influx of traffic. And they're saying to us, and they're saying, I think, not saying to us because they haven't spoken to us, but what we've heard is that, it's not going to be much environmental impact. There's not going to be a lot of truck traffic. It's just airplanes flying in, everything's going to be rosy. But what we've seen is that they've already built about, like, in the area, just like dozens of delivery stations ready for the influx. So that means that all those trucks coming out of Newark Airport are going directly into our communities. And we've already overloaded with Amazon vans because a lot of those vans go into New York City. So the amount of vans that we see, hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands a day coming out of our communities already into New York, is incredible. And just to give a little bit of background on the environmental impact, which we are very much tying together with the jobs component, is 2018, Amazon emitted 44.4 million metric tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. They deliver about 3.5 billion packages annually. I know that's way more now. I think this is a study done years ago. And they continue to solicit businesses of oil and gas, of course. And they have sponsored fundraisers with climate denier think tanks. So, we already know that Amazon, even though they've said otherwise, is not a friend to the environment. I mean, big businesses usually are not. So I mean, I think that's the end of it. I'm sure I'm forgetting a lot of stuff, but just in New Jersey, we are taking that approach of doing kind of like the worker and environmental organizing together. We've created this coalition because of what is happening at the Newark Airport. And we found that just connecting a lot of these issues together makes sense for our community, and has been a great way of organizing around Amazon. And I will put in the chat our website where we have a lot of our news clips, where we have our pledge card if folks want to sign, if they're from the area. Yeah, and thank you so much again, Dr. Hilal, for having me and for giving us the space to talk about what's happening in New Jersey with Amazon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Ambelli. Now we have Veronica, who is able to get on right now, and she'll be talking a little bit more about workers' rights as well.
Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Perfect. Thank you for having me. I apologize, just leaving a doctor's visit for my little one, but my name is Veronica. I'm an organizer with the Warehouse Worker Resource Center. We've been organizing in Southern California about the last 10 years. So maybe I can start by just giving a little bit of a background about the industry and how it's kind of ballooned into this, monster that it is. So about 12 years ago, we started as a project from Change to Win. Some research had been done about what was the next frontier for organizing and what were those key industries. It was identified that logistics, hospitality, the medical fields were definitely three big industries that we needed to pay attention to. So fast forward 5 years in, and Walmart was figuring out how they could, in essence, continue to build their conglomerate by subcontracting workers and kind of eliminating the need and the responsibility for them to take care of their workers. And so we saw the development of the temp agency model and this idea of workers in very precarious situations. And now, 12 years in, we have now Amazon kind of taking everything over. And so before I get into the Amazon, one thing that you guys should know is that our region didn't always start off as the central concentration for warehouses in the country. Originally, the Inland Valley or Inland Empire was, farmlands, citrus groves, dairy farms out here. And when Los Angeles was experiencing their environmental awakening, the Inland Valley was kind of raising flags and was like, hey, warehouses, you guys can come inland 40 miles east and we don't care, we don't care what you guys do. And so the IE kind of opened up an invitation for the displacement of warehousing from the metropolis of Los Angeles areas, where the Los Angeles Long Beach ports are. Most of the goods at the Western United States does come in through the ports of LA Long Beach, and we serve the entire West Coast. And it would just be a 40-mile eastward site with ample amounts of land, so room for development, room for expansion. And so that's what happened, and that's how Walmart and these big warehouses kind of shifted inland. And once they established themselves here, so did bodies to fill those positions. And with the development of Walmart's shift of accountability and responsibility towards its workers, we started to see the conditions go down drastically. And so while we had our series of issues with Walmart, what we're seeing as a new frontier is definitely the way Amazon has developed its situations. In the beginning, when we were exploring what these conditions were, what we noticed was that Amazon actually was like, we don't need to go through temp agencies. We could hire directly, and we could, in essence, have like these perma temp or seasonal positions where we could mass hire and mass lay off seasonal workers. And so we have the development of the badge system. I don't know what it's like in other parts of the country, but the badge system was like, we could hire, 1,000 workers during the peak seasons and then lay off, 1,200 workers during Christmas, or pay workers to leave the facility and then hire people again. If you're asking me how are things now, we're not seeing layoffs. Part of it is because we think they've literally burned through everyone they could have in the IE. The amount of turnover has been insane. And so now we're not seeing layoffs where we would have seen it at the beginning of the year. We have facilities where they have completely automated through giant systems called linear, where workers are just feeding the machine, and some of the things that I'm hearing from workers is like, I'm sitting idle or I'm standing idle with nothing to do for hours on end. But the biggest complaint is the isolation. I'm not doing anything. I can't engage with anyone, and I'm literally just me and a robot. And the mental toll and stress has been really difficult. And then at another site where we actually have an entire underground comité functioning, what we're seeing is that issues pop up frequently because the policies are not across the board. So we have management kind of figuring things out as they go. When workers get injured, they kind of make rules up, launch investigations, figure out how that can be pinned onto workers. They have the entire development of the AmCare system, so Amazon's internal assessment process for if you're injured, does this require you to go outside to seek attention? And most of the time they're trying to treat in-house, often the time acting or taking the role of medical professionals, which we are still in the process of exploring and investigating the legitimacy of this. And then we have other issues around wages. Even within the comité, some of our leaders are like, now we're seeing Amazon now we're seeing Walmart at their DC starting to pay $22 an hour. So people like actually thinking like, where can I go elsewhere? Because Amazon is no longer cutting it in terms of being one of the higher wage paying employers. And so we're seeing a big opportunity for us to organize or to continue to organize with our community. And at the same time, understanding that this is a humongous feat for us to take on, and still being really excited because it's just the nature of what we do. I know that was a lot. I don't know if there's any questions, comments, or concerns. Got it. The IE refers to the inland region of Southern California. So you have the Los Angeles metropolitan area, and we are 40 miles eastland of Los Angeles. There is the Coachella Valley that spans into further south. That is not us. That is now another region. We are the largest 2 county regions in terms of geographical space in the Inland Valley. So we're really desert is what we are out here. But the amount of people that have shifted inland to chase jobs has been extreme over the last decade. Yeah, so I'm seeing a comment. to tie this back to the first session today, all the great benefits that Amazon likes to claim, zero of that applies to contract and subcontractors, and even to in-house direct employees, right? One of the things that we saw during the Christmas season was they had little to no announcement of shutdown days. And so people that worked back half shifts were directly impacted because Amazon was like, we're going to shut the facility down. There's going to be no pay. And they had a very limited amount of opportunities to earn or come in on during other times to make up those wages. So some people that were impacted lost up to 32 hours. There was like really harsh stories of how people even got challenged with evictions because they went with almost an entire week of no wages. That's actually a fight that our workers took on. And the latest is that Amazon during their last all hands meeting claimed to be changing the policy at certain facilities because of this push. This was an action driven that, you know, in an 1,800 person facility, about 207 people signed a petition and pushed on this for about a month and was able to get a response from Amazon. Right, the IE is east of LA. That the U.S. is so adamantly against nationalizing. Yes, yes, about the monopolies piece. Yeah, and so, you know, these are some of the things that our workers are definitely seeing. Like, how can we make these positions better positions? How could we make the Amazon more accountable to the impacts it's creating? And so on the inside part, we see the conditions directly impacting workers. And on the outside part, we see Amazon coming in, asking for giant subsidies from places that have had financial difficulties. For example, in San Bernardino, they took over the Norton Air Force Base, an ex-military base that wasn't being utilized. They subsidized most of that development. Really unfortunate because it's San Bernardino has been going through financial difficulties for many years. The city even went bankrupt, and it's a place that needs a lot of resources because of the mismanagement of the people running the city. And so now you have Amazon saying, I'm here, I'm going to offer these jobs, and this is a wage that I'm starting people at, the $17 or whatever. But then that disqualifies many of our community from being on some type of assistance, and the amounts that they are paying is not enough for them, for our community to then be able to sustain a family. And so we see people being creative and, you know, holding multiple jobs, figuring out how they're going to support their families. One worker leader that comes to mind is constantly struggling. Her son is going through a lot of crises in his junior high, and she's like, I can't be with him, I can't take him to the attention that he needs because I'm always here, and I'm here and it's not enough to support him. And so they're caught in limbo. Some other stories are like, I need the public assistance dollars to survive. And so Amazon is impacting our communities in multiple manners, not to mention the environmental impacts that it's created. There was overriding considerations that were approved for this air facility to go through. You're talking about an inactive air site that operated no more than about 2 flights a day. And at the peak, the projection is that this site will become a site that will operate up to 24 flights a day. So you know, the impacts, the environmental impacts and the health impacts to community will be drastic. And it was approved in large part because of the financial and economic contributions that was alleged this was going to create for the San Bernardino residents. So the impacts are very widely felt, and also being fed to a community that has no other options. Many employers, many infrastructure that was in San Bernardino before the financial crisis of that city actually fled San Bernardino. So now you have a place that can offer 1,800 jobs. And it's like, what do we do, right? Doesn't Ontario, California already have a large airport? We do have an airport, yes. And Amazon is there already. The difference is that the Norton Air Force Base would be, it's there, it's literally Amazon's airport now. It would be, it's the contract that was given to them, they'd be operating the facility. If I were, I'm trying to remember the rate just to allow you guys to gasp. It was something so ridiculous, like for the next 30 years, they could pay like $100, like something that was just crazy. And again, we're like the people of San Bernardino are in essence subsidizing this. Yes, Ontario has an airport. It's more of a commercial facility, more of a commercial for passengers. And this is a air freight airport that is kind of being taken over because it used to be a military base. Exactly, Air Amazonas.
I have a question for both of you, just kind of based off of what we've been talking about so far today. Are y'all familiar with each other's like work? And also, what kind of seems to be the universal issues across the board?
Maybe I can start. One of the things that we are definitely paying attention to is the wins that, you know, the East Coast is having. The $2 raises are something that is like, we want that, right? We want that in California. And realistically, thinking about how can we kind of use the pressure that the wins that other places are getting to even go higher, and then how could we continue to piggyback to continue to raise the floor for our community. So wages, hands down, is an issue. The other thing that I'm definitely seeing is the impact on health and especially mental health. So on the one hand, I hear people saying fighting around not having to do a lot of work is a tough fight, but the mental strain of isolation is heavy. One of the first times that I became engaged with some workers, the first thing that came out of their mouth was, we don't have an active shooter policy. And these were white men that, you know, I came together, about 8 men. You know, we were looking at a site in Moreno Valley, and they were like, we need an active shooter policy. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not understanding. What do you mean? And they were like, we need an active shooter policy in case someone goes AWOL and starts shooting the place up. And I didn't really comprehend. I was like, why would they do that? And they were like, people are so on edge because they don't want to lose their job, because they feel like they're so disposable that anything triggers and sets people off. And that was very eye-opening for me, because I didn't expect this from white middle-aged men. And then on the other hand, I definitely see the health impacts of the strain of physical toil and movement of people's forcing themselves to extremes is also an issue at other facilities. So I think that we have the wages and the impacts to health across the board are very similar. But I don't know the conditions of the other places that Amazon people are organizing inside of Amazon.
I'm so sorry, I didn't catch all of the questions. I apologize. Hi, Veronica. And thank you for your amazing work in California. So here in New Jersey, and I'm sorry, could you repeat the question again, just to make sure that I'm answering correctly?
Yeah, so the question was kind of just based off of what y'all have heard each other talk and what we've discussed so far, seeing if there are any kind of like constant issues that you see pop up across the board
Okay. Yeah, and I just wanted to mention, we actually, before our fight with the airport hub here in Newark, we met with some folks from San Bernardino to kind of start our own campaign against this airport hub in Newark. So that was really helpful for us just to see the community effort around, kind of stopping the airport hub. And here in Newark, they haven't signed the agreement yet for the airport hub. And they actually were supposed to sign on November 1st of last year, and they haven't signed yet because, and from we've heard, is that there's a lot of problems in the community with the hub. So it's been really successful for us, the campaign that we've waged to a certain extent, because they haven't signed the deal yet. And I guess the Port Authority and Amazon just, are not in agreement about a lot of things. So that's how we've also been able to kind of learn from folks in California in a way. And then just across the board, I guess injury rates, high turnover is just across the board, across the country. I haven't spoken to an organizer yet who, doesn't speak on that. Yeah, and I agree with Veronica, what she's saying about the mental state. It's very hard to organize in a space like where you're so isolated, right? And where you feel that isolation so deeply. So, again, what we found is when we are in the community, when we've been canvassing around the airport hub, talking to workers outside has been the most effective for us, because that's where they feel community, that's where they feel supported, and that's where they feel safe. A lot of these workers work 10 to 12 hour shifts. So like talking to them after a shift, it's just not going to happen. So I think that, so I think that's, that's been the most effective thing for us. And just, talking about, it's just really sad because they use, us, and by us, I mean brown and black bodies, just make this record amount of profit that they've made in such a short time. And they use and dispose of us to a certain extent, because I just know a lot of people from my own community here in Newark were just not able to work again because of the injuries they sustain at Amazon. And I guess it's part of the history of this country to use, black and brown bodies for that purpose, to make huge amounts of profit. I think connecting a lot of that stuff, I'm from Make the Road, New Jersey, so we do a lot of pop ed. So connecting those systems of oppression, forming those committees of workers who are talking to each other, forming that community is super duper important, like Veronica has mentioned, just so people don't feel so alone. Because I think, that's the purpose, is to make you feel alone, like you're the only one going through this. And I think through organizing, workers connect to each other and then connect to their power. So I see Mike said, will Teterboro become included in the New Jersey Airport Hub? I have no idea. We have literally no information from Amazon about what their strategy is or what they're planning. They have refused to talk to the community completely. And that's part of our fight, our big state fight, because the way they've expanded is just, we have so many major mayors who sign on to this letter. We have a sign-on letters with different politicians from the area about stopping this airport hub and getting more information to the community, because even the existing delivery stations and the existing warehouses in Elizabeth and Newark and other areas around us, even when they come in, we have very minimal information. And when they come in, they take over spaces that are not even included in their leases or included in what, you know, the city had given them permission to use. We've seen that in Elizabeth, and we've seen that in other areas of New Jersey. I mean, literally, they're just doing whatever. And I guess we have been kind of like the first groups, you know, to kind of be like, you need to stop expanding. You need to stop. So yeah. So I have no idea if they're going into Teterboro. I have no idea where they're planning to go to. This would be the first airport hub in New Jersey, Newark, and we know that this Newark airport hub is key. Like, it's key for them. I mean, the second largest port in the country is like literally a couple of miles away from there. Like, the amount of money they will make if this airport hub opens will be insane, just because of the amount of people in the area. And, you know, like, all of that is going to go to New York City for the most part. I hope that answered the question.
That was great. Thank you so much.
I have a question, and like for both of y'all, but I'm more familiar with like Cali, so like maybe better like around like the shift for people, like you mentioned, people have been moving from like LA to like Inland Empire looking for jobs, right? But there's also like the big factor of just like the cost of living and housing. And I'm sure now the cost of living is going up in your area too, right? And so earlier we had a session about just like Amazon's impact on housing. So I'm curious if you could share a little bit about that. And then also like if you are, like I know like the environmental issues have been happening for a while, but like is it getting worse also with the increased like housing development too and population increase, et cetera? And yeah, just like for our local context for Virginia, like I think about like the displacement a lot from like Arlington County, DC, like folks are getting pushed out to other parts of Maryland, right? Or to like Prince William County, Haymarket, like further out, right? And of course, for example, like in Virginia, further out is like where they have all their data centers, right? Further out is where they're like trying to like build up the bigger distribution centers, right? So yeah, just wanted to see if y'all could share a little bit about how y'all seen that play out in your areas.
Yeah, absolutely. The housing situation has definitely changed from a decade ago. I only moved to the IE in 2006, and I'm originally from Los Angeles. So when I came, there was so much development happening. And then during the crises, during the housing crises, development kind of stopped, but the people were already shifting inland. That pause in housing development, but the continuation of growth kind of created this niche for rents and living situations to become harsher for our communities. Right now, one of our people that is inside of our facility is now trying, they just said last week, like, I think we found a break to rent out like a garage for like $1,400. And I was just like, I remember I left LA because I couldn't afford $1,400 rent in a small 2-bedroom place. So things are definitely, they're definitely peaking in the IE already. We are seeing the development kind of slowed down, and the environmental impacts just have added to that because the IE is kind of like a bowl. So we would already compete in terms of air quality and environmental conditions. I wasn't here in the IE when this was happening, but people tell me like there used to be days where there were no school days because the air quality was so bad, or kids couldn't go outside and they were being kept inside of classrooms. That was a few years before I actually moved out. And now it's just like been normalized. Like it's completely normal for the conditions to be this harsh. One elected politician, when we were confronting, when our coalition was confronting him about the conditions and the quality and the pollution, his response was, I grew up just fine. I can see mountains. When I was growing up, people will be just fine. And I was just like, oh my God, what's wrong with you? And so that's the kind of considerations that I think electeds make. They're thinking from the lens of economic growth versus human sustainability and what's going to create health for our communities and etc. We have been engaged in a fight around indirect source rule, ISR, where the allegation has been like some of these warehouses need to be accountable because they are a magnet for the pollution that moves into the region. And that's been an ongoing fight that hasn't been driven by us, but we have been as supporters, the EJ groups in our areas who we partner very closely with have been doing these fights. And then you see like kind of some of the responses is like, we're going to put more trees against like the walls of facilities. We're going to, do a bike path lane. And I'm like, that doesn't stop the trailers from coming. Like, how do you not fucking get this? But these people don't live in our communities, right? There is a direct correlation for where the warehouses prop up, what residences become rezoned for commercials, as commercial sites, and what areas do not. We also have a Euclid corridor with these gigantic Victorian, humongous houses, beautiful, green, middle aisle in the middle of the street that is just like gorgeous. That's not where our people live. The warehouses are across the street from brown, Black, and Indigenous peoples of colors communities, and will keep happening until we stop them. And then the last thing you mentioned was around the tech. We also have one of those facilities, Amazon also has some of its first what are they called, fusion centers, where they're like experimenting with the data that they're collecting, sharing that with police departments and etc., is also in our region. So we also participated in the No Tech for ICE campaign a few years ago, right before the pandemic, pushing on Amazon to stop collaborating, because we frankly are in a very red, very hostile region that does collaborate with law enforcement agencies that again target our same communities for living.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can answer some of that, but I will just say that I think in the area that we're in the New York City metro area. We have some of the highest rents in the country, and probably the highest right now. Everything is up. We definitely have a huge housing crisis here. And just to give a very kind of maybe personal just account of what's kind of happening is, 20 years ago, my father moved from New York City to Pennsylvania because he couldn't afford, moved to Pennsylvania. Both my brother and my stepmother worked for Amazon warehouse in Pennsylvania. They're propping up everywhere in the last 5 years or 4 years. And now, they have to keep moving, but as they keep moving from New York City to New Jersey to Pennsylvania, Amazon is following them everywhere. And the rents just keep going up and up and up in each of these areas. And I think, that's the only jobs they can get. But like Veronica said, they're not sustainable jobs. They're not jobs that are paying enough for them to live in that area. So they keep moving to cheaper areas. But again, the only jobs that they can really get in their situation is that Amazon job. So it's just a vicious cycle of they're moving from New York, from New Jersey into Pennsylvania, and wherever you go in that corridor of where people of color are moving, you find an Amazon, you find that they're paying a little bit above average, right? But it's still not enough for them to stay there. So it keeps a group of people just moving, trying to get to something better, but it's just not working out. So I think, I always say that the solution is to organize in your community and fight for, for something better. So.
Thank you so much. Someone in the chat commented, what has outreach to other orgs involved with the human cost of Amazon been like? Groups like the International Brotherhood of Teamsters have been heavily involved, as they are heavily tied to humanizing the transportation and freight industries.
Sorry, Veronica. I can start. So we're actually working very closely with the Teamsters, and they're actually part of the Good Jobs Clean Air Coalition, along with a couple of other unions as well that are part of our coalition. Just because, I mean, at this point, like, if you are a worker in a union, you're probably going to have to get into this fight in New Jersey because they're driving down everything, like everything. In New Jersey, we are warehouse central, right? Like, it's just warehouse work is the work, right? For a lot of people. So I think I always joke around that if you're in a union, or if you are a union, you're probably going to be at some point in the next couple of years fighting Amazon. It's to some degree. So I think, a lot of unions have joined into our coalition. They are displacing workers at the Newark airport right now to kind of like renovate those warehouses where, supposedly Amazon will be going into for the airport hub. And I think there's about 2 unions involved in that have members there that are being displaced. And it's just, we're working with a lot of EJ groups too from the area that are involved in our coalition. And I think it's growing. It's growing exponentially. We didn't expect for it to be like so big, but it's a monopoly. So I guess we're just fighting it at every single angle we can because it's really just taken over our state.
And in our area, we are also involved with a local out here, the Teamsters Local 1932, and it's been a really good partnership for us. And we're also intentionally, the IE was such a drastic change from Los Angeles, who has like this abundance of resources and organizations. We had no choice but kind of to collaborate with one another. We developed this center called the Social Justice Hub, and we're a small hub that has like immigrant rights organizations that we're a part of, us, labor. There is actually another union in our center, a civic engagement partner, a youth partner, and a day labor center. And then we created an expanded group that we have to collaborate with because we have Amazon now giving monies to school to track kids from the K through 12 grades. So they'll drop $20,000 to a freaking unified school district, and the district sends these notices out to parents who don't understand what they're agreeing to because Amazon's gonna give them $20K for fucking computers. And they're like, yeah, like let's do this tracking thing with Amazon, which is gnarly to me to think about, but they don't have workers. And so they have to figure out how are we going to retain people that will be able to do the grunt work. The automation game, I definitely think is coming. I think there's still going to be a need for hands-on tasks. And so the collaboration, like by force, we need to be doing it. The EJ people are not free of Amazon, just like Yambeli said, right? Like the immigrant rights movement is not free of Amazon. So we have to work together. And we've done a really great job, I feel like, just like being in support of one another. About right when the pandemics were beginning, we had immigration doing mass drop-offs in our area, just like dumping Central American refugees in our region. And this coalition kind of got together and sheltered and transported 500 people to their final destinations. And these people are gonna work somewhere. Some of them stayed locally. A lot of them moved eastward in the country. But these organizations bring their members and then they're like, oh shit, like, what are you guys doing? And we have people that are like, I'm not on Amazon, but my conditions are being set because of what the way Amazon operates, which is true. They set the standard for the industry as the largest corporation. So it's imperative that we work together. I agree with everything Yambeli said.
Okay, so I also had a question, and this is generally about like organizing a resistance, because I think a lot of us are familiar with what has been happening, like the tricks that Amazon used in Birmingham, and I think at JFK1 or JFK, like one of the JFK warehouses. Like a lot of the usual anti-union tactics. And earlier today, we watched some of the videos about like Amazon's own anti-union propaganda. I'm curious what kind of resistance y'all have come up against, either directly from Amazon or maybe from Amazon workers to organizing.
So it's interesting because at the place where we're the most active now, they haven't known quite what to do about us. And so we've been having these like incremental wins. Our comité is also very much underground right now. So they are operating as their own group. They deserve all the credit. They've been doing the entire work themselves. We meet weekly with them. We have like an internal infrastructure program, but they're doing the work. And I think that because they are not part of a union drive or outward facing campaign, Amazon has kind of been like, what do we do? Like, let's tread nicely. Let's try to give them these wins. And our folks have been seeing that and they're like, oh shit, like, yeah, you know, they do these little, not little, I'm not trying to be condescending, but they make these moves and then they win. And then they're like, oh, we did that. And we're like, yes, you did that. Hooray. And it doesn't all have to be around worker issues. We had a young lady who passed away in a car accident, tragically, not Amazon related. They brought in a grief counselor to meet with, you know, many workers who were her friends. Amazon tried to then tell them, you cannot take the day off for her burial. And 16 workers went and delegated on the spot, and they got Amazon to give time off and then give additional time for them to make up later. And they've been having wins like this, like the policy change that I mentioned earlier. I think that probably is going to change once and if they come out. They are sizing up our group. We did have the regional manager visit our store, visit our shop, and start to like identify the people that were part of the petition demanding the retro pay and the certain demands around the holiday hours cut. So they're definitely keeping track. But so far, there hasn't been significant pushback or attacks towards our people. In another facility where workers also pushed back around a health and safety issue, the lower level manager, as soon as they did the delegation, came and interviewed everyone and was like, why would you fucking sign this petition? And then Amazon like freaked out and then went and they like, I think they suspended her. One of the young men actually was like, remove my name from the petition. He was so afraid. And then that kind of fizzled the energy there. It created a chilling effect, which kind of then paused the organizing there. That and some of the kids ended up going back to school. So it hasn't been the resistance that we are seeing happening in the East Coast, but we're taking notes and we study, like, we make sure to start doing the inoculation, right? To get our folks ready of like what to expect so that it doesn't create the chilling effect, and that they could be in conversation with each other of like, these are possible tactics and this is what we have to be ready to respond with.
Yeah, so there's a lot of resistance in the East Coast, which is great. We personally are not involved. Well, kind of, and yes, but like we have a very small, like underground kind of group that's working, but it's not, strong yet. They're just workers who are trying to just kind of like figure stuff out still. But we do have a member from our organization that is at the JFK 8 site. We are not involved in the JFK fight, but we have been hearing all the news. They will be having a union vote soon. And it's just a very, very, very interesting case. I think you guys can get more information on that. Yeah, so there is a lot of resistance. There are, from what we've heard, there's a lot of anti-union meetings because it's really, really intense in there right now at that Staten Island warehouse. But in New Jersey right now, I know that there are very underground committees right now who are, like Vero described, are, doing March on the Bosses. They are winning small but like significant, changes to policy in different warehouses, especially in South Jersey that we've heard, and not small because I feel like everyone is huge, but yeah, so it's incremental changes that are happening in different warehouses all over. I'm not leading that work, but there is a network of people leading that work here in New Jersey that I am connected to as well. And yeah, and they've been doing it for a lot longer here at Make the Road. We just kind of started doing that work like last year. So we still have a very small committee that's, resisting, but very, we're not at the level yet of just, doing any kind of March on the Boss or doing kind of any kind of petition yet. But, I always say, like, workers are braver than they think, right? People are braver than they think. And, there's all kinds of things happening right now at these facilities that are just amazing. I mean, and they're up against so much. So just to like some of the worker stuff that I forgot to mention, the dynamics in our community are usually here in Newark and I'm sure in other places is that they pin minority groups against each other. They're in New Jersey. Jersey City is the most diverse city in the country right now. Like, and I'm sure there are places like that in California as well, where unfortunately what happens is that in our communities, they pin us against each other in order to like reap profit, right? In order for us to like not really challenge the system, in order for us to really not organize as well as we could. And that's what I love so much about our coalition is that we're kind of like we're not doing that. But in Amazon warehouses, what we've heard from a lot of workers, especially from workers here in Newark, is that they do that inside of the facilities. So they put Hispanics against like some of the Black workers, even though some, Hispanic, we come in all different colors. But like they pin us against each other in a way that makes it hard to organize inside some of those warehouses or some of those delivery stations where we are now. And also there is a good group of Black immigrant workers from West Africa that we've also been in touch with that work at some of the facilities in the area. And they've been saying that they're not up for promotions, but they're the hardest workers. They have the highest rates in the warehouses. So there's a lot of that kind of racism within the warehouses that is just so noticeable and just so there and then glaringly obvious for those workers. So, and it's been, and some of those workers have even been like, you should come to my church. Like half of the people in my church in Newark, we're from Nigeria, but half of us are working at the Amazon facility, and having those connections, doing those connections are really important because it's just, those are the kind of issues we've been kind of organizing around that have made things more effective for us. And just kind of building worker power in a way that doesn't replicate the same conflicts that happen in our community. But kind of transcends those conflicts. And for me, I feel like that's resistance, right? Just not replicating the same thing that happens in your community in the workplace and kind of going beyond that. I don't know if that made sense, but that's what we're doing.
Thank you so much. I have one more question. What messages have been most effective in shifting the narrative in favor of workers' rights? And I'll drop it in the chat as well.
I'm so sorry. Can you repeat that? I couldn't hear.
No. What messages have been most effective in shifting the narrative in favor of workers' rights?
In favor of workers' rights, sorry, the narrative where in the community, inside the warehouse, or just in general, I guess.
I can say this. So just like the narratives in terms of gaining public support.
Oh, okay.
Embrace some of the changes that workers are asking for.
Yeah, that's a big one for us in Newark. So years ago, I worked for Newark for the city, and Amazon was in great partnership with the city of Newark because they were providing jobs and providing Ring video, like the Ring videos. Like everybody in Newark got a Ring thing for free for their houses, if you can believe it or not. And I think Amazon got in there and organized our elected officials and our some of our community folks in a really effective way. Like Amazon came in and gave us jobs. Amazon came in and gave us this. Amazon came in and gave, and I think shifting that narrative now, at the beginning, they were like, why are you talking bad about Amazon? Why are you guys saying all this stuff? At least they have jobs. I think we've been shifting the narrative a lot. And I think one of the messagings that's been most effective around workers is just connecting, that brown and Black people, we deserve more, as communities, we deserve more than just these jobs that churn us over and just use and disuse us, right? I think that has been really, really effective messaging. And it's been messaging that's been connecting because our communities for decades have been used and disused, especially in this area, by industry. Newark and Elizabeth it's just factories. We're all for decades, and once those factories closed, then we were out of jobs. And once they reopened again, we had jobs again. And it's been a consistent, just come and go of big business that has exploited us. And it's a narrative that people know very well, they've just forgotten. It's like we have amnesia in our communities and we just forget that these companies have been in our communities and they've used us and then they've left us with a whole bunch of problems, right? Like in Newark, we have like around 4 to 5 Superfund sites just from these factories that were there, in the 60s and 70s that, the government hasn't even begun to clean up yet. We have a garbage incinerator that burns trash from New York City. Like we already know this narrative, like, in us, like we know our families who have suffered through this. We know this system very well. So for Amazon to come in like they're a savior, like our communities know better, you know what I mean? And I think our elected officials know better. I think, Amazon was just using our collective amnesia for a minute to just, come in as a savior. And I think, just connecting it to our local fights that we've had before has been really great messaging in order to kind of protect workers and build support around workers in the community. So that's the kind of messaging we've been working on. And in Newark, it's been, it's been effective so far to kind of connect all those things.
Yeah, I'd 100% agree. I think very similar to Yambeli and everything that's happening in Newark. Like our community is so desperate for, jobs and to be able to support themselves, that there was almost like this competition. Like, are you in the industry? And if yes, well, which employer are you with? And Amazon being like this. This status symbol. Like I work for Amazon, like not one of the bottom feeder facilities, but over this last decade, and especially true after the pandemic, even though our community is exhausted about talking about the pandemic, so workers don't want to hear anything about the pandemic, they also experienced what it was like to physically work for Amazon during the pandemic. And I think that exhaustion is now like, bend us the eyes where people are like, no, they're fucked up employers. They grind us until we physically can't anymore. And they're making record profits also. And they're impacting which companies, because they decided in the pandemic that they would kind of be the dictators of who got to sell goods through them because of the, what was considered an emergency good or not. And so I think that realization has been really important for our community, having that lived experience, and now having no more workers, right? Like workers are like, yeah, there's a reason why nobody wants to work here. I'm an Amazon worker. And the going number, even though we haven't corroborated it entirely, but 1 out of every 3 individuals that we engage with in our community has some direct connection to Amazon. Either they worked at Amazon, they have a family or loved one who's worked at Amazon or has been impacted by Amazon, or they have like some knowledge of Amazon having impacted them in their lives, whether it's secondarily through their community by setting up a shop or whatnot. And so now people are starting to be like, yo, this place is not all it's cracked out to be. And so just helping our community, like repeating it, is like the constant repetition of these things with our community to remind them, like, this is what these people like place at your disposal, and then they take away every other opportunity. And so continuing to repeat that and having our community digest and analyze that has been really important in a way for us to shift the narrative. And then also like then us adding in our 2 cents of like, well, they're not doing this alone, right? Like there's culprits and there is accomplices to this. And so like what policies, what elected officials are contributing to this mess, are supporting them in the crime that they're committing against your communities, and how do we hold everyone accountable and kind of giving that sense of retaking of power has been really good for us in the.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, you know, like it for us, you know, we do have a small group, and they're still not ready to. Some of our workers are still not ready, obviously, to speak publicly on certain things. You know, they work for Amazon, they're scared to a certain degree, but lifting up those worker stories, like I almost felt when I first started to talk to a lot of people from different facilities in the area that every single worker had a story, right, about something really messed up that they experienced while working for Amazon during the pandemic. But it was almost like they didn't even want to share it because of, like, I mean, number one, the trauma, obviously, but like working through the pandemic was a really traumatic experience for many workers. But second, it was like almost like the community didn't want to hear it. You know what I mean? Because they were like, well, just be grateful for Amazon being here. Why are you complaining about your job? You know, like, why are you, like, you're making more right now doing very easy work. You know, you're just standing there, like just scanning boxes or you know what I mean? There was almost like a shame around it, you know what I mean? Especially around the pandemic to a certain extent. And I was not shocked, but it was just kind of like, wow, like there's a lot of work needed here to kind of change that and just kind of like just talk about it openly and have a safe space where workers could like really talk about it. It almost felt like the worker felt like they were all by themselves experiencing this really traumatic experience by themselves, and that nobody else was experiencing with them, you know? And that for me was just very very eye-opening. And it goes back to what Veronica said, where they felt very isolated. It's this type of feeling of just like, I must be the only one who got injured and couldn't get a job afterwards. Like I can't work again, you know, after Amazon. Like we've had members who have worked for Amazon who have told us like they're injured, they're disabled now, they're not going to be able to work again. And they don't even want to talk about it. There's like a shame around it because I guess they felt like they could have done something to not get injured. They could have done something to not like be so weak or something like that. Like it's in like the mentality about it is very like it was very eye-opening to me and to some of the other organizers here, just because when we were hearing these stories, we were like, this is really bad. This is not good. Like, what are you talking about? You know? And they were just like, oh, well, like, that's what everybody, like, that's just how it is there, you know? And, you know, I just didn't tell anyone, or I tried to tell HR, but nobody really like got back to me. So I just left. And, yeah, it's just, the shame, the embarrassment, like I guess, you know, our mentality around capitalism and, you know, how we just have to like work ourselves through it. That whole messaging, we just had to like, that whole mentality, we had to like, you know, really work through it as we continue to organize workers in the area.
I really want to echo the last part like going in, it was really big also in California. And in California, out of the 10 industries that were categorized as essential, we ended up as a byproduct of the pandemic and also a fucked up capitalism status, taking on a fight for excluded worker benefits because the people that didn't get a chance to say no during the pandemic, if anyone had a chance, it was people with status that somehow may have qualified for pandemic relief dollars or unemployment or things of that nature. But during the last administration, you had the attack on our undocumented folks of all races. And so there was like this exodus of public benefit dollars And then they were also excluded from pandemic relief dollars, and then they were also excluded from federal dollars. So we had like workers that were like, I can't even complain because I'm in a mixed status household, and now I'm the only one that is employed because of, because Amazon is one of the places that continues to operate in a crazy status, but nonetheless continues to operate. And so there is this like deepening of trauma that was happening in our communities. And it was really harsh, right? And so when I talk about like there are people, all kinds of people were impacted. Like the secondary impacts of that is like a household that was like, well, Amazon kept my husband employed or whatever, and they also exposed them like crazy, like wouldn't tell them when there was an outbreak, would minimize outbreaks, would have them become the janitors and the disinfectant crew, would put them in a site where they didn't tell them like there was an outbreak here and are you going to operate here, and then they'll send out a fucking email or a text blast like 5 days later after the exposure, and it was just insane, right? So just wanna echo everything that Yambeli said. It was nuts.
Okay, I think Steph might be having some technical difficulties, but thank you so much, Veronica and Yambali. That was amazing. And really grateful to both of you for sharing this information. And on a Sunday, I'm sure you have a lot of things to do. And we're super grateful to both of you. And also glad that we recorded this and we will be sharing it out to everyone who registered and on our website. So people may be contacting you because you have a lot of wisdom and knowledge to share with us. And we're very grateful for that. So thank you both so much. We're gonna talk about Amazon in the local context. And of course, we would welcome you participating and staying, but also we know that you're both very busy. So we leave it up to you, but thank you again, both so much. That was incredible.
Thank you so much, guys, for having us. Have a great day, everyone, okay?
Thank you. Okay, and I'm gonna hand it to Danny now.
Am I up?
Yes.
Cool. All right. Hi, folks. And thanks, folks who are here so in the space with us. We're gonna just do a quick wrap up and just share a little bit about some info we gathered. I'm not sure exactly what the timeline was now, but some months ago, did a survey about what folks are interested in this area and what's most concerning about Amazon being here. And so let me pull up this presentation. Any chance you can share it? Well, hold on. No, never mind. I think I got it. Yeah, I got it. Let me share this. All right, and we're gonna keep it brief. So we are just sharing these results from the survey we did for the DMV area. I believe most of the responses were from Virginia, is that right? Or was it spread
The
out?
majority, yes, but it was
Majority Virginia?
targeting DMV residents.
Cool. And so we asked a series of questions. And question number one is, where do you live? Oh, here's my answer. So the vast majority of the responses were Northern Virginia, but we did get some from DC and Maryland as well. And before we share this, like I think that this could be like a continuous effort to like get more information. So folks who live in DC or in Maryland, by chance, if you're here, like y'all should feel free to share this out with other folks, right? And to keep continuing to gather information about what folks are concerned about and are also interested in organizing about. And so here is a quick snapshot of what folks' concerns have like are the most centered right in this issue. So number one, as y'all can see, is gentrification, displacement, and then also really closely worker exploitation. So the sessions, a couple of the sessions that we heard today, right, are really relevant to the interest that folks have here in the area. Following that is also police and surveillance, which we heard about yesterday. And, you know, we have been able to have some impact so far in countering these efforts, but we know that Amazon, the police state, et cetera, are constantly trying to expand their reach. And so this is something that, of course, we want to keep tracking and work with partners such as Media Justice and other organizations who are challenging these tech weapons for police. And then local decision-making. We already know the issue in Virginia of how communities have been left out, but we've been hearing that throughout the weekend, right? We heard about that. Folks that we're just speaking right now, as far as like developments happening, folks being left out, in like the housing situation in Seattle and other examples. Environmental impacts as well. And I think this is one that like is of course, like all of these are connected, but when we talk about like the data centers, when we talk about developments, when we talk about the use of water and everything, I was just reading a piece about like all the waste that Amazon has, right? All of that combined makes Amazon one of the biggest polluters globally. And so that's a big issue that a lot of folks are worried about. And I also think that particularly in places, for example, like Arlington County, where, you know, they claim to be so progressive, they claim to be caring about the environment. It's always a big question for me about why don't they care about Amazon's impact in the issue, right? And then other pieces are the grocery stores that we know that they're continuing to push out smaller businesses, right? But opening up their grocery stores, and a lot of that also includes more connections with surveillance, people using data, right? And like often like also I think they're considering like fingerprints, things like that to be able to shop, and just biometric information to track even just consumers, right? And then along with these other pieces as well, accessible services like public transportation. And this is one that we're also seeing linked up with the housing and that potential, like that quote unquote housing equity fund. And so we're trying to understand what exactly is happening here in this issue as well. And then the next question was, have you or anyone you know experienced any of the following due to Amazon's influence in the region? So top two, overwhelming, right? Rent increases and being pushed out of neighborhoods is something that's been happening, but it's extremely felt now, right, since Amazon HQ2. And so this is when Luz was speaking earlier, right, like the two examples that Luz shared, Columbia Gardens, right, where this is something that is people are being pushed out right now without any real support and without commitments for folks to be able to remain in their community long term. And so that's a big concern that we have as a coalition and of course as communities. Working conditions, we heard that way that Amazon sets the standards around working conditions. So when they take over, they drastically drop and they set that harmful standard, as folks say, like race to the bottom, right? Lots of small businesses. We've heard also from small businesses. Luz and another organizer have been doing outreach, for example, in South Arlington along Columbia Pike. And I went one day, and like we had 5 conversations with small business owners, and like 3 of them on their own brought up Amazon being a concern, right? Not even us asking about it, like they just know and they're feeling it already. And otherwise, racial profiling. We've talked some about Ring, right? We've talked some about the way that like gentrification also impacts this. But one thing that we're trying to like, it's difficult to like talk about a lot because we don't have that much information. But Amazon is working on creating what they call a regional security council, and they have one that they started in Seattle. They're probably in the process of putting one together here, where they're trying to work with police departments and different agencies to create this security council for themselves, right? And of course, with that, we can expect a lot of more racial profiling as happens in this racist country. And then the other part is also loss of employment, right? Where we know that folks have also experienced that issue due to Amazon's influence. And so here is, right, where we as FUNA and groups that organize against Amazon, we really know that a big part of the fight is about community control, self-determination. And if we had decision-making that was really rooted in people, right? Taking leadership from folks who are most impacted, and if politicians actually had a political courage to stand up against organizations like Amazon and listen to the people, we'd be seeing investments in these types of ways, including affordable housing, healthcare, public education, transportation, and also connected to affordable housing, like direct assistance and providing funds and subsidies for renters, right? Not for corporations, but for folks who need it, and to prevent the displacement that we know Amazon is exacerbating. And then here's also just a quick chart of folks' opinions on what people feel like is most needed. So affordable housing, healthcare, mental health services, public transportation, financial security, better public education, and employment opportunities. And so we know factually, right, Amazon is not a solution for any of these. In fact, they are making things worse in so many ways. They're trying to, continue to create privatization of even various of these types of services, right? And that's something that we can't allow. And then around the employment opportunities, right, where that is something that folks have expressed that is most needed. This is just wanting to recognize this is a DMV area, right? But we know in other parts, for example, Virginia, unemployment rates are much higher. We know that, for example, in Richmond area, I just misplaced the word. Desalojos. Displacement. But yeah, like when people are sent to court, I'm forgetting that term right now. Wow. But the displacement, right, is happening. In Richmond, there's a huge crisis of people being pushed out of their homes, right? And so this is just for this area, but I know if we were to grow the scope of it, there would definitely be other ways that folks are really concerned about this. And then also, when it says employment evictions, thank you, Alex. So yeah, there's a huge eviction crisis in Richmond and in other parts of Virginia, and I'm sure in Maryland too, right? So all this, I think would definitely shift a little bit, but still housing would be a key issue throughout the region. And then employment opportunities, right? That's something that folks need. And I think also a lot of our framework is quality jobs, living wages, right? Not exploitative and abusive jobs as Amazon provides. But then also, really changing the way that power dynamics work here. Virginia, for example, constantly touts the fact that they're quote unquote the #1 state for business, right? But then what does that mean for working people? What does that mean for folks who are creating really all of the resources and wealth that these corporations extract, right? And so this is, again, a quick summary of what the survey covered. It was over 100 responses, right? And so it feels like it was a pretty good snapshot of what folks in this area are feeling. And we are looking, like I said, to hear more from others and to continue to grow this base to organize against Amazon's impact and fight for like I said earlier, self-determination of our communities. And so with that, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. And so, I just wanted to see if folks have any questions or any additional thoughts that folks would like to share. We are close to closing out, so just wanted to give folks an opportunity for that.
This is probably obvious because obviously the numbers don't add up to 100. They far surpass that. So just in case you didn't see, for each of the questions, multiple responses were possible. And the reason that's important is because when you look at, what does our community need most, it's possible that someone could have marked 3 or 4 of the responses, which means there are a lot of community needs. So I think that's important to keep in mind, just because, Amazon does not bring singular issues to communities, it brings multiple issues to communities.
Agreed. I see Ibrahim, you have a question.
Hey everybody, sound to those around as well. Thank you so much for everything you guys have been doing. I know I mentioned this earlier in a little message, and I've been watching yesterday primarily. I just couldn't get off a meeting today to focus in again, and really learned a lot. And I know I'm jumping at the end, and I don't know if this is out of place to ask, but I'm certainly looking forward to, next steps. I think if I understand correctly, you guys were just kind of gauging where you guys are at as far as where people think we should go with the work, or I'd just like to be briefly caught up. And hopefully I'm not completely out of order, and would love to support the efforts in any way I can. Again, thank you so much for everything.
Cool. Yeah. So there will be some follow-up, like where we'll send out the videos, links, and everything to the recordings. And then also a forum for folks, right, to see if they want to help out and in what ways you'd like to connect. Also, if there are folks here who are part of organizations, right, it's a coalition that's made up of both organizations and individuals, right? That's how we've been since we started. So we also encourage folks to get involved that way. And yeah, like part of this is definitely to do some grounding on the way, like the local political education, and taking direction from folks as to where we'd like to proceed. Right now, though, we do have some of the work going on around housing and Amazon's impact there so housing justice work, and supporting Justice for Pooh, the sister, Pooh Brown, who died who worked at the Springfield warehouse, and supporting their family. And then, of course, some other issues like policing and surveillance that we're also tracking in this area. So in this area, primarily, those are the main focuses, right? But as we're able to grow more organizing spaces and coalition, if there are folks who are interested in like anchoring other pieces, then, we're definitely open to that. But yeah, is there anybody that want to share anything for here?
I think as the Institute has made quite clear, right, Amazon brings a lot of issues. And so we have kind of sought to tackle multiple issues, I think, at the same time. And so I think we're trying to sort of maybe hone in on more of a handful of issues and then address, some of the, I'd say like rapid response kind of things as they come up. But I think it's been difficult. And I think one of the reasons why we hosted this institute is just to get more capacity and get more engagement with folks in the DMV, because, it's only been around, that HQ2 has not been around in the DMV area that long, but nevertheless, it has already had significant impacts. So if you are interested in getting involved, if you know people who want to get involved, please send them our way, because we definitely need to collectively challenge Amazon, especially, as they do things from, having influence over what a library auditorium is named, to giving local foundations money, to, overtaking neighborhoods, pushing people out, and the list goes on and on and on. So we really need to, bolster support for challenging and pushing back against Amazon. And I see that Alex has a question about Ring. Danny, I'm going to defer to you because you did more of the work on that.
Sure. So I'll just read the question out loud. Alex says that, I was in Sterling, a low-income community in Loudoun, and so many people have Amazon Ring. How can we get involved in educating our community about how dangerous it is to have one, especially if you're undocumented? So there are, I think, a few things that come to mind. One thing is checking if there is an agreement between the police department, the city, or et cetera, right? And Amazon. If there isn't information available for that, then a public information request may be needed. That's basically how we were able to get some more of the information for Arlington County, and to try to understand basically what they were trying to propose. Because then like then that is like a crucial piece of information, right? If the police department has like more access, then people need to know that, right? The other pieces, we can also share some materials of, for example, Fight for the Future, Media Justice, Acre, organizations that have been doing research into Amazon Ring already for some time. And there are some like pieces of info that we can share. And, you know, in the past, we hosted a teach-in with Media Justice. And that was a really helpful tool. I'm not sure if we have that recording, but if we do, like, we could also share that out too. And then otherwise, like, you know, the usual tactics, right? Just flyering, door knocking, engaging folks, teach-ins, right? And to try to mobilize people into preventing or stopping ring agreements. And the other resource I would also say is Mi Gente, right? When you mentioned about, of course, undocumented folks, and we know they do a lot of, they anchor the work for No Tech for ICE. And so being able to connect people to those ongoing efforts and those resources would also, I think, be really helpful.
I would add as a sort of broader point, you know, Ring is a manifestation of the problem that, you know, people don't trust each other. There's no sense of community, and, you know, we have a lot of racist, xenophobic, Islamophobic, you know, communities, neighborhoods, societies. And so I think, you know, just broadly speaking, thinking about, you know, what are the ways we can generate conversations in our communities about what makes us feel safe and secure. And, you know, depending on what kind of community is, what the person's comfort level is and all that, you know, getting into some of the, you know, work on anti-racism, because that is, you know, that does underlie a lot of the use of these technologies, right? White people aren't necessarily afraid of other white people, right? They're afraid of people of color and people who've been otherized and marginalized. And I'm sure you know this, Alex, but I think just like getting at the root, because Ring is one manifestation. I mean, we have something in our neighborhood that we're not subscribed to, but you know, my family kept getting messages like, you should join, you should join. And it's like meant to make you feel safe and secure, but it doesn't really, because if you're a person of color, you could also be the target of, you know, the technology that theoretically is supposed to make you, you know, feel safe by protecting you from people that look like you.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing that I also remembered is that there, as we know, Amazon has huge propaganda resources, right? And more recently, I have started noticing like an increased effort on Spanish speaking radio, for example, where not only just ads, but basically they've also got like the radio hosts start announcing, oh, Ring, blah, blah, blah. So like getting paid for that, right? Of course. So that might be something to consider in the future too, right? Pushing radio stations or other sort of like influential spaces to actually challenge that type of PR that they're promoting.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I've gone to like Best Buy a handful of times and they have like massive Ring displays. And it's, you know, obviously, you know, it's there to make it look flashy and, you know, very easy to use and things like that. And obviously we know the repercussions. I think, yeah, just kind of paying attention. And also, you know, I've seen a bunch of Amazon Ring commercials and, you know, I think obviously they have been accused of being racist, anti-Black, xenophobic, etc. So, you know, the people that are sort of featured as like the perpetrators in the videos of Ring aren't, you know, always people of color, because they're trying to get away from the assumption that that's who the camera would help you target. So I think it's also paying attention to that narrative that's like being very manipulative about who's actually probably going to be targeted by these technologies.
Cool. Any other questions or comments that folks would like to share? Oh, I see a question, a comment from D. Arellano says, thank you for all this information, especially given that Bezos is investing in early childhood education in Texas and opening a warehouse in McAllen, Texas. Yeah. If you're interested, I'm not sure if you're connected with folks that already with Athena, right? But I know like the national coalition we're a part of, folks would be down to connect with more info if that's helpful in Texas. And yeah. Awesome. Cool. All right, see, Ibrahim, did you raise your hand again?
Yes, I got a quick question for you guys. Based on your assessment on the ground, what would you say the biggest issue affecting people on the margins in Northern Virginia from Amazon is as it currently stands? I know it's hard to, pick and choose, but, as far as what you guys are seeing on everyday, life examination, direct impact that can be, most closely related to Amazon. I was wondering if you guys had something that would jump off your mind right away.
Yeah, I'd say housing right now is the top one that folks are feeling the most immediately. I'm not sure if you were on this part yet, but we did a survey recently, and most of the responses were housing related as far as the top issues.
And we're talking about rising prices of property and rent, in conjunction with evictions. Is this a perception of sort of what happened during the pandemic, or is this also something that will be is foreseen as long lasting at this point?
Oh no, that's long lasting, just like development and redevelopment. During the session earlier in housing, one of our organizers shared about Columbia Gardens Apartments in Arlington, where they are redeveloping the property. The company that bought it purchased it by right, but it's been affordable for many, many years, and then now they're gonna knock those down and rebuild and build fancy townhouses, right? So those are the types of things that we're seeing, and increasingly with Amazon. But yeah, of course, increasing rents as well, I think, is the other big piece.
Awesome. I only asked because I'm certainly looking forward to combining a lot of housing efforts that I'm familiar with, hopefully through conversations that come from this forum, to bring together a lot of forces around housing, because I certainly think the same. And I definitely look forward to continuing that work that you guys have been doing, that others have been doing, including my own as well on housing. Southern Towers also, I'm sure you guys are familiar of, in Alexandria. They're a big deal, and they're organized, and there's a lot of debt collectors and financiers of projects there that have been harming the local African communities, immigrant African communities in the Southern Towers, and they've been organizing. So that's something that I've been familiar with, and would love to see if we can connect all these, bits and pieces together, I think, going forward. And certainly looking forward to the guidance that you guys have in terms of on the ground.
Cool. Sounds good. Thank you. I see Chris dropped the link again in the chat. If folks can support residents of Columbia Gardens, we have a petition going, and there are also actions happening weekly on Fridays, I believe at 5 p.m. At the apartments. Well, cool. We are about to come up on the hour. We are getting done early again today, so it's really great. But there's been, I think, a lot of amazing information shared that we can continue to learn from, right? We'll have the information, the links available and stuff. And then, this is a space of community learning that we're going to continue to keep holding similar spaces, right? And so I think that's it on my part. Maybe I can hand it back to Meha and maybe Chris as well, since y'all coordinated so much for this. If y'all want to help us close out.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, everyone, for attending. For those of you who participated via Zoom, for those of you who watched the live streams. We're really grateful that you took time on this weekend to be with us in this space. This was just an idea a couple months ago, and it took some work to manifest it, but it was guided by the belief and the knowledge that, you know, collectively we needed to and have to challenge Amazon in our neighborhood, in our communities, in our societies, domestically and abroad. So we're really, really grateful that you were here this weekend. In terms of some follow-up, we will be sending out a survey. This is our first institute that we've convened. So we will hopefully plan to convene other institutes, both to address and reiterate some of the same issues, but also to address some of the issues we didn't get to talk about, such as Amazon's role, for example, in perpetuating apartheid and war. So stay tuned for that. We will be sending out a survey, so we would absolutely love your feedback. So the next time we organize and convene an institute, we can improve the institute based on your suggestions. And hopefully in the coming weeks, we will have the videos put up on our website, which we will have a more complete version of in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that. And when we do have the videos up, please do feel free to share them out. We also have an amazing orientation guide that Chris put together, and it's incredible. It's a really great primer for anyone who wants to learn at least some information and get sort of the groundwork in terms of the knowledge that you need to kind of get a preliminary look at a lot of these issues. So that is already available at forusnotamazon.org, and you can download it, but we will definitely be updating it with more resources and links to share, so look out for that. And finally, I'll hand it off to Chris if Chris has anything to add. But finally, on my end, please do email us at forusnotamazon@gmail.com. If you are interested in getting involved. We will again be sending out a survey where you can indicate that. But you can also feel free to email us beforehand if you so wish, and we would love to hear from you, especially if you have ideas on organizing and want to join us to increase our capacity to push back against Amazon in the DMV. So with that, I think Chris does not have anything to add, but I'm grateful to all of you and all of the For Us Not Amazon organizers who helped put this together, including Chris, including Steph, including Danny and Kaiser. We've worked quite closely together on this project, and hopefully we can keep learning together and keep building our capacity and our power to challenge the Amazon in the DMV and across the country, and to really create communities of support and solidarity so that we can really stand up to and win when it comes to Amazon. So thank you all so much again. And we look forward to being in touch with you and in community with you in the future.